Welcome, everyone, to IDDI's on-demand podcast series. Today's session will focus on how the statistical methodology called Generalized Pairwise Comparisons, or GPC, can help reduce sample sizes in clinical trials. Joining us to discuss further are Francesco Sclafani, Head of Clinic, Department of Gastrointestinal Oncology at Institut Jules Bordet, and Mickaël De Backer, Senior Research Biostatistician at IDDI. Well, good afternoon, Francesco and Mickaël, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon. It's a shared pleasure.
Excellent. So, Mickaël, to get us started here, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your position at IDDI?
Sure. So I'm holding a PhD in biostatistics from the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. And after my PhD, I started collaborating with the so-called Benefit Consortium, which was an international team of researchers and funded by the Walloon region and led by IDDI. So essentially, the goal of the consortium was to explore and develop the potential of generalized pairwise comparisons, or simply GPC, which is an innovative statistical method proposed by Mark Buys, the founder of IDDI. So the consortium was funded for 3.5 years. And at the end of this period, I joined IDDI, where my role is to further develop the method and focus on its applications as well.
Okay, great. And perhaps you can share some further details about this GPC methodology.
Of course. I will make it short, but for those who are interested in more information, be sure to visit the IDDI website or simply reach out to us. All right, so GPC is a statistical method for analyzing data coming from clinical trials. So what makes it special is that it provides a solution to one of the fundamental limitations of the way data is usually analyzed in trials, where the effects on patients of a new therapy are evaluated completely separately. And when you analyze effects separately, you may miss the big picture. Are the patients experiencing some toxicity from the therapy also the ones that have important survival benefits in return? Or are they, on the contrary, also the ones that do not benefit in terms of prolonged survival? When you analyze the two effects separately, you have no information about the link and interactions between these effects. Well, this is, of course, crucial for patients and their physicians when taking treatment decisions. So in contrast, GPC allows you to analyze simultaneously several endpoints that are of interest in a trial, and then summarize the analysis into a single measure of how effective your therapy is. So that's the first key component. And a second key component is that it allows you to define in your analysis which of the effects are the most important one from a clinical point of view. You get to prioritize the effects by order of clinical relevance. In summary, GPC allows you to simultaneously analyze several hierarchically ordered endpoints in a way that is both statistically sound and clinically relevant.
Okay, well, thank you, Mickaël, for the short explanation. So, Francesco, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, especially your position at the Jules Bordet, and also interesting for the audience, how you heard about this GPC method, and I think in particular why you considered using this for your trial.
Sure. I'm a consultant GI medical oncologist, and I work as a head of clinic and head of the GI lab in the digestive oncology department at the Institut Jules Bordet in Brussels. My main focus is clinical research in colorectal cancer. I first heard about GPC when I actually approached Mark Buys to discuss a new study idea. In short, I wanted to design a clinical trial comparing two standard of care treatments in older patients with rectal cancer. And actually, I was looking for a smart study design with a composite endpoint that could allow us assessing both the efficacy and safety of treatment, and ultimately provide an accurate estimate of the overall treatment benefit. These being defined according to criteria that are chosen and valued by patients themselves. Such an approach is especially relevant for older patients who might have different views and priorities compared to the general population. Furthermore, by using GPC, we could design a more pragmatic trial and reduce the sample size. And this was extremely important as we know very well how challenging could be conducted studies in older patients.
Okay, excellent. And Mickaël, it would be great to learn why GPC was chosen for the study design and also, its impact on the sample size.
Sure. So the question at hand here is, well, can we show that by using a less intensive treatment for elderly patients with rectal cancer in this case, we still provide an overall benefit to the patients? So in essence, it's a benefit risk type of question. On one hand, we may have a deterioration in terms of efficacy by not resorting to the intensive treatment, but the premise is that this is overcome by non-efficacy gains such as, well, reduced toxicity, improved quality of life, and overall better tolerance to the therapy. So, in fact, in practice, it's not uncommon that patients, typically for more fragile populations, well, they are driven towards a less intensive regimen during their therapy, specifically because they no longer tolerate all the side effects they are exposed to. The question for them is thus, couldn't we have avoided experiencing all these negative effects by directly starting with the less intensive regimens? Now, what statisticians are used to do in this case is to conduct what we call a non-inferiority trial. So we expect that by reducing the dose, the deterioration of the therapy in terms of efficacy is within a limit that is, let's say, clinically acceptable, hence the non-inferior vocabulary. So conventionally, our attention is completely drawn to the risk part of the benefit risk question, and the benefit part is here disregarded. What this means is that when statisticians calculate sample sizes for the trial, well, they ignore the benefit part. Whether you expect a small or a very big benefit from the reduced regimen, your sample size will be, well, exactly the same. So you may realize that this is, to the least, not optimal. But more importantly, this is again missing on the big picture research question, which is in fact a superiority question. Is the new intervention globally superior to the standard of care when all important effects are taken into account? And as introduced before, to answer such global questions, GPC is a method of choice. You analyze efficacy and non-efficacy effects simultaneously, and you prioritize the efficacy part in order to be sure not to hide any, let's say, unacceptable deterioration on that part. So in essence, for this trial, GPC allowed to reduce dramatically the sample size by, well, first endorsing that a superiority question requires a superiority analysis, and second, take profit from the important gains the clinical team is expecting on reduced toxicity in this present case.
Okay, great. And, Francesco, from the sponsor's point of view, would you be able to help explain how this method impacted the design of your trial?
Yes, so as Mickaël pointed out, GPC allow us to set a primary endpoint for the trial that could look at both the risk and benefit of one treatment strategy over another. Notably, it also allows us to bring patients' voice into the study design and understand what patients value most when it comes to making treatment decisions. In short, we selected two key efficacy and two key safety outcome measures, which were hierarchically ordered into a sort of priority list. To establish priorities, we then organized several meetings with patients and patients' representative groups from both my institution, which was the Pizarro Group, and Digestive Cancer Europe. In addition to telling us what they felt most important as outcome measure for cancer treatment, patients and patients' representatives provide us with what we could define as an acceptable trade-off between efficacy and toxicity. In other words, they indicated what they thought was the minimum gain in efficacy that could be justified by an increase in toxicity. And all this information was used to finalize the study design and calculate the sample size.
Okay, and the design has now been accepted by the funder of the study, the Belgian Healthcare Knowledge Center, or KCE. Could you tell the audience how the design was received by them? I think, the discussions about having GPC as the primary analysis.
Well, I have to say that at the beginning it was a bit challenging. GPC is quite a no short or long term toxicity. are certainly valued, they are analyzed novel statistical methodology, and not many investigators, reviewers, or funders are actually fully aware of its applications in clinical research. One of the main concerns was the limited power of the trial to demonstrate significant gains or losses, especially for the efficacy outcome measures. I would say that it is understandable, as we are used to judge the potential of a given treatment strategy by mostly looking at the associated survival advantages, while other outcome measures, such as separately, generally as secondary endpoints and not really factored into a composite endpoint that takes into account both efficacy and safety. Nevertheless, I would like to thank KCE, which gave us during the selection process the chance to explain more in detail the rationale of our proposed statistical approach, which in the end was appreciated for its potential to conduct patient-centered, pragmatic, randomized, multi-center trials. Indeed, as you know, KCE Trials is a funding for non-commercial clinical trials funded by the Belgian public authorities, and these clinical trials address issues that are usually neglected by industry despite their high societal importance.
Okay, and more globally, again, from the sponsor's point of view, what did you gain by using this method? And for future trials, would you still consider using GPC?
From a sponsor point of view, I think the main lesson here is that whenever you have a potentially good idea that is difficult to convert into a feasible clinical trial, you really need to seek support as early as possible from experienced clinical methodologists. Thinking outside the box and designing novel study design with innovative statistical methods could give you the chance to run trials that would otherwise be impossible to conduct. This is even more valuable if such study designs foster patients' empowerment in clinical research, paying special attention to patients' needs and priorities, as is the case for our trial. And I will definitely consider using again GPC in the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, Francesco and Mickaël, and thank you everyone for joining today's session of IDDI's On Demand podcast. If you have any specific questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please contact us via info@iddi.com. And stay tuned for the next podcast from IDDI. Until then, bye for now.